Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the week 6 office hours of the partner certification Kickstart for the Associate Cloud Engineer. So, my name is George Geronimo. I'm a customer engineer. I've been part of the Google team for just shy of 3 years, and I'm happy to be kind of your host for this again the second of two office hours for this cohort for the Associate Cloud Engineer. So that's the who I am, rather. And now I think you understand kind of why we are here, right? If you came to understand a little bit more or learn a little bit more about um, how to prepare for the exam, what you should have reviewed in terms of materials and hands on reading, then you're in the right place. If you're looking for a different meeting, then you should probably check your schedule to make sure that you clicked on the right link for the correct meeting. So let's go on and get right into it here. The Associate Cloud Engineer is there we go. The Associate Cloud Engineer is something that we should have been preparing for over the last 5.5 weeks. So this being the halfway through the 6th week. So what we're going to talk about today is the current progress, right? Again, those materials that you should have covered, both the reading material through Coursera, a little bit of hands-on there, as well as the quick labs that we make available for the more hands-on type of experience. So we're going to talk a little bit after we're done with the checkpoint of where we should be. We're going to talk a bit about the exam itself. So what does that mean? Well, I'll be talking a little bit about the general, a few of the general questions that we hear from participants or from people who are listening to this webcast in terms of almost like an FAQ, right? We're going to cover off on how long the exam is, how many questions, all that great stuff. We'll also then go into what the next steps are. In other words, what do you have to look forward to in the next week and a half, and what are the things that you should have in mind as you prepare to set a date, if you haven't already, in order to take the exam. After we're done with those three kind of topics, what we'll go into is some live Q&A. We have, at least on my browser, another tab that has a section for the Q&A. No questions have been asked yet. So if you have questions in advance, feel free to plug them in there. And if not, or if something is not clear while I'm kind of going through all this material, then certainly feel free to add your questions in the Q&A section. So the Associate Cloud Engineer. What is it and where does it fall within the continuum of the different exams that we have for Google Cloud Platform? So if you have questions about this exam or any other exam for that matter, a great place to go and get more information, possibly find your answer, is a website, is our certification website rather, cloud.google.com, which is generally your jumping off point for all things Google Cloud. Again, that's cloud.google.com/certification. And that will land you on a page that talks a bit about why you should get certified. It talks, if you scroll down that splash page, it also talks about the different certification levels. We have a handful of different certification levels. We have the associate certification, which this particular exam falls into. The Associate Cloud Engineer is an associate certification. And there are professional certifications. Professional certifications include currently the Professional Cloud Architect, the Professional Data Engineer, Professional Cloud Developer, Professional Cloud DevOps Engineer, though that is in beta, and the a couple more here, the Professional Cloud Network Engineer and a Professional Cloud Security Engineer. Last but not least, the Professional Collaboration Engineer. So these are designed to kind of fit a specialization or a specific set of skills within all things Google Cloud. Professional certifications are job role based and assess advanced design and implementation skills that you would have developed through a handful of years of hands-on experience. That is somewhat different to the associate engineer or the associate certifications, where the certification is more task-based and focused on core Google Cloud Platform technologies. This certification, the Associate Cloud Engineer certification or certificate, is a good starting point for anyone who's new to Google Cloud or new to cloud in general. And it's used as a really good kind of first step on that path to achieving the professional level certification. The recommended experience for the Associate Cloud Engineer is about 6 months of hands-on experience with GCP. So that's a bit about the exam itself, where it falls within the family of certifications that we have. There is one other certification type that I did not mention, and I'll mention now for the sake of completeness, and that is the G Suite certification. And that's designed to assess your proficiency in your ability to use core tools and services from G Suite. So when you think of that um, exam, think of our cloud-based tools to create and share documents, spreadsheets, presentations, files, and so on. So that's where that's the final group within the families of our cloud certifications. So where should you be in this current cohort for the Associate Cloud Engineer? If I refer to it as ACE, that's because it's ACE, right? Shorthand acronym for Associate Cloud Engineer, or ACE. So if you hear me say ACE, I'm talking about the exam. So let's go on and see in this life cycle of this 6 weeks where you should be, the things you should have covered. If you haven't started on any of the material review, then perhaps you should start soon if you want to hit that November 22nd deadline. What is the November 22nd deadline? Great question. I'm glad you asked. Stay tuned. Cliffhanger there. All right. So the certification Kickstart has been going on for 5.5 weeks, as I've mentioned a handful of times at this point. Throughout these past 5 weeks, you should have done a handful of Coursera courses. The Coursera courses include Fundamental Core Infrastructure, Cloud Infrastructure Foundation, Infrastructure Core Services, and a handful of others. Along with that, as part of the partner certification program, we also provide the ability to actually do a lot of the separate, fully hands-on exercises. And some of those exercises are even packaged up and delivered as what we call quests. So those are designed to be complementary skills or complementary hands-on exercises that kind of build upon each other as you progress through the quest. And those are delivered via quick labs. So you should have done a handful of labs up to this point, and potentially even started on a quest or two. There are a couple of optional there are a couple of optional pieces of reading. I know that there are a lot of folks out there who are already very proficient and well versed with other cloud providers, and we fully acknowledge that. And for those folks, we have another Coursera course that's GCP fundamentals for, say, AWS professionals. So that's another piece of additional reading that you can do depending on your how well versed you are with again, other cloud technologies, other cloud providers. This week you have a hands-on lab that is the cloud engineering. The guidance on this exam is that it should take you, or excuse me, on this lab is that it should take about 7 hours. You know, your mileage may vary. The time that it takes you to accomplish or to complete all of those hands-on exercises may be more, maybe less. Just depends on, again, your comfort level with the material. Perhaps if you've gone through the material before, you'll find that if you're going through it a second or a third time, then you'll go through it a little faster because you're more familiar with the material and the requirements of the hands-on exercise in general. If you are trending or tracking along with the 6-week course set of materials, that is, then next week you might even be You might even have scheduled your exam to be taken next week. And if you are in that, if you do find yourself in that situation, great, congratulations, good for you. I am a very strong proponent of registering for the exam and taking the exam within 1 to 2 weeks of completing all of the material. And why is that? Well, that's when all of the material is freshest in our minds, right? It's all of these facts are kind of in cache, so to speak. So the longer you take without assuming that you don't review the material, if the longer you wait, the more that material will get pushed out of cache, out of your recent memory, and you may find the exam to be a bit more challenging in that case. So a little bit about the exam information, right? These are, again, some of those things that over the last handful of iterations of these office hours that we've seen as kind of trends, right? FAQs almost. So a lot of questions around whether you can take the exam offsite or if you have to be in a particular location, how long is it? How many questions does it have? All of those different things. So here you go. The key facts around the exam are that you can only, this particular exam, well, let me backtrack. For any of the Google Cloud certifications, you are required to take those exams for the certificate in person in a testing center. You are not able to, unlike other cloud providers or just other technologies in general, you aren't able to have to take the test like remotely from your living room or some other building, so long as you have like a certified proctor. So only in person and only in a testing center is where you are where you have to take the test. When you are taking the test, you will have 2 hours to complete the exam. And the exam is made up of 50 multiple choice or multiple select questions. So what is the difference between multiple choice, multiple select? Multiple choice means that you have one question and you have 4 or 5 different answers, and one of those answers will be the most correct. And in those cases, that's just one answer, right? It's multiple choice. You pick one. Multiple select is kind of the same format. It's a single question, but then you have 4 or 5 different answers. And of those 4 or 5 different answers, there may be more than one or more correct answers. There's a couple of different ways to notice on the exam that which is which, whether it's a multiple choice or multiple select, and that is radio buttons versus checkboxes. So the radio buttons or little bubbles that you fill in are generally the single answer type questions or the multiple choice type questions. And then for the multiple select, you have checkboxes where you click on again anywhere between one and all of the checkboxes depending on what you deem to be most correct. So that is that. There are a lot of other questions that we get on the taking the exam itself. So let's see here. Remind myself how I get to this. Okay, so if you jump in the Wayback Machine, way back about 10 minutes ago, I mentioned that there is a site for all of these certifications, all of the Google Cloud certifications, that is. So that site again is cloud.google.com/certificate /certification, excuse me. And so if you scroll down to the associate certifications, you'll find there's a single exam listed there, the Associate Cloud Engineer. Within that, the box for that exam, you'll see that there are 2 links. One says register and one says details. So if you click on the details link, that will take you to another page, which has, again, a brief description of what the exam is aiming to do. Again, those assess your proficiency with the task-based items that we cover, as well as then a link to register for the exam, and then another button for other FAQs. Other questions that I typically see in the Q&A section are which languages the exam is available in. And in this case, specific to the ACE exam, the Associate Cloud Engineer. The exam is available in English, Japanese, Spanish, Portuguese, French, German, and Indonesian. I believe that is the most number or the highest number of different languages that any of our exams is available in. So if you speak any of those languages, proficient or are well versed or proficient enough in any of those languages to take, then you can take the exam in one of those languages. On the same page, if you continue scrolling, there's the same information that we kind of just covered, right? The duration of the exam, the registration fee, if you're paying for it out of pocket, or if your employer is paying for that, the exam format, again, multiple choice, multiple select, whether there are any prerequisites, and what our guidance is on recommended experience prior to the exam. Also included are some training materials, which are actually all part of this 6-week cohort. There is some hands-on practice, which again is redirects you to quick labs, all of which is included as part of this cohort. And then there's a practice exam, which we haven't touched on yet, but it's out there. There are generally a few questions around that as well. Questions about the questions, I would say. There's additional resources on the page, right? More hands-on labs and a handful of other links to documentation and whatnot. Again, all of the things that you will find on this page, I've noticed, are part of this 6-week Kickstart cohort. So tips and tricks. You've now gone through the training material, you've done the hands-on, you've registered for the exam, and today's the big day. So tips and tricks for when you are taking the test is to remember that some of the things to keep in mind are to remember that this is really a practitioner's exam. So you'll need to apply your personal experience and knowledge while making your way through the test and answering the questions. So the courses that we provide, the lab materials, and other materials can teach you about Google Cloud Platform specific products and solutions. But what we're looking to understand really with the exam is how you apply that knowledge to real world workloads in production. And for that, right, you will need to draw a little bit on your own real world experience. So that is all to say that it's a fair exam, at least in my opinion, of really the knowledge that you've accumulated over the last 6 or more months, maybe years, and how you take this knowledge, right, this GCP, Google Cloud Platform specific knowledge, and apply it to these real world scenarios. So more tips and tricks. Read the questions carefully. There may be hints within the question as to what the right answer is or the most correct answer is, especially when there seems to be more than one answer which is valid. So an example of this, you might be asked to provide a solution that minimizes costs or alternatively uses managed services as much as possible. And this can then result in different answers to the same technical requirements. So there's that. While you're taking the exam, also bear in mind that you can mark answers for review that you're not necessarily sure about, or you're not absolutely certain about. And then at the end of the exam, go back and review those that you've checked. You have the ability to check all of your answers, but if you're crunched for time, you can skip past the ones that you're certain about and only kind of focus that remaining time on the questions that you were unsure of. And the way to denote those or annotate those is by a little checkbox that says review at the end. So those are some tips and tricks. I find that it's one of my personal exam taking tips is to actually go through and read all of the questions in the exam without answering any of them, despite whether or not you are absolutely certain you know what the answer is. Just read through the questions, read through the answers. That starts to kind of jog my memory and start loading things into RAM or cache, kind of as I talked about or as I alluded to before. And it also helps me start to get ahead of some of those questions where I may not necessarily be 100% sure of the answer, but I kind of set a little cron process in the back that starts chipping away at the different options and which one and identifying which one is the best alternative or the best answer. So moving on then from the tips and tricks, how to register for the exam. Um, Now that I think about this, I really should have put this how to register slide before the tips and tricks, because you have to know how to register before you need the tips and tricks. But anyways, I digress. So register, visit the certification site, as I mentioned before, a handful of times at this point, cloud.google.com/certification. On that splash page, on that initial page that you arrive at, there's a schedule exam. At least as of this morning, there is a schedule an exam button like right at the top of the page next to a video. And if you weren't on that page, you scroll down and you actually went into, and we're looking at the Associate Cloud Certification description and the exam details, you would see that there's a register button there as well. So you could scroll down on that splash page and register from there. Or if you're looking at the details of the specific exam, you would also see that there is a register button very near the top. In fact, it's right underneath again, the description of the exam and what the exam is assessing your ability to do. So there's no shortage of ways to actually get to the certification site. Once you are there, if you haven't already, you would create a Google Cloud Web Assessor account, and you would sign up with your partner domain email. So if you don't have a web assessor account, you'll be asked to create one that is free. And it's very important to make sure you log in with your partner domain email. Otherwise, your certification will not count towards your employer's partner program requirements. So, because it's so important, I will say that again. Make sure you sign up uh, with your partner domain email. Otherwise, your certification will not count toward your employer's partner program requirements. If you have already registered with a personal email account, you can transfer the certification after you have passed the exam, but that requires paperwork. In other words, filling out some forms. And it's one of those, hey, look, if you can avoid it, just avoid it, right? It's not necessarily recommended to go that route, but if you have to do it, then you have to do it. Remember, though, that regardless of whether you use a personal email account or your partner domain email, that the certification that you earn is yours, right? That's yours. No one can take that from you. It's not your employer's. So if you you leave your current position or your current job for whatever reason, you can take the certification with you, right? That certification number, the certificate number that you earn, is yours to keep, at least for the next 2 years, after which it will expire. So, but it's portable. That's the key point to drive here. So let's move on and talk about next steps and how to stay on track, what to expect for or out of the rest of this week and then next week. So if you haven't done so already, you want to complete the Cloud Engineering Quest on Quick Labs. As I mentioned before, right, the quest is a set of prepackaged hands-on exercises that build upon each other, and ultimately, once you complete those, then you complete the quest. And the other thing for this week is to make sure that if you haven't at least once, then definitely try and do so this week. And if you've already taken it, maybe you want to retake it a second or third time. What that thing is the Associate Cloud Engineer Practice Exam. So how do you get to the practice exam? I'm glad you asked. So if you go to that certification webpage And then you click into the details for the Associate Cloud Engineer. You scroll past that register button. You scroll past the information about the certification exam and a few other bullet points. You'll find that bullet point number 4, in a total of 6 bullet points, bullet point number 4 is the practice exam. So if you are wanting to type that into your URL, you would go cloud.google.com/certification/cloud hyphen engineer. So, and then scroll down and you will see point number 4 near the about 3/4 of the way down is a link to the practice exam to check your readiness to take the exam. So this doesn't the practice taking the practice exam and doing well on it doesn't necessarily mean that you're guaranteed to pass the exam. What it does indicate, though, is how prepared you are for it. If you are going through the practice exam and you find that you are struggling with a lot of the questions, or you answer a lot of the questions inaccurately, I would say, then you may want to go through and review some of the preparation materials, right? The Coursera's and the Quick Labs. If you are able to sail through it quickly and you get a lot of the answers, most if not all the answers correct, then I would say you're ready. Does it guarantee that you're going to pass? No, but it's a good indicator. It's a good bellwether of how you will fare during the actual exam. Then next week, again, if you are, that would be week 7 next week. If you are following along and tracking to the predefined schedule, then you should be ready to take the exam. And assuming that if you haven't done so already, then go through and register to take the exam at a certified testing center and take the test. First question, and I'll just read the questions. I'll leave out the names so that I don't butcher anyone's name. I've had my own name butchered enough times that I know how painful it is to hear someone mispronounce your name. So the first question is there a source to take practice tests from Google? And also, so that's question part A, question 1, part A. Question 1, part B is, what is the passing score out of 50? So the first part A, there is a certification, a practice test for the certificate. And it's cloud.google.com/certificate/practice exam with a hyphen in there, and /cloud engineer with a hyphen in there as well. Fortunately, someone has been nice enough to paste in the link to that practice exam. If you are making your way through if you're making your way through the material via the website, then you know to go to cloud.google.com/certification. And then from there, scroll down to Associate Cloud Engineer and click Details. That should bring you to the page, which is cloud.google.com/certification/cloud engineer with a hyphen between cloud and engineer. You scroll down again past that register button, so you should know where to register for the exam. Scroll past the about the exam, and then you get into the numbered bullet points. Bullet point number 4 is a link to check your readiness to take the exam. So if you are not watching the Q&A window, or you are just wanting to know how to kind of navigate there via a browser, that's how you get there. So part B of that question is, what is the passing score out of 50? That's a good question. We don't necessarily score. We don't provide you with a score of your taking of the exam. So out of 50, we don't tell you, hey, you got like a 48 or you got a 32 or a 12. There's a lot of reasons for that. And part of it has to do with the difference between Google Cloud exams and exams from other providers in general, from other either cloud providers or technology providers. So our exams again aren't necessarily designed to stack rank can't test takers or test or certificate achievers. Rather, it's an assessment of whether you know the material and whether you have the experience to have the certification. So given that we don't necessarily tell you, number one, here's your score at the end of the exam. The other thing that you will notice that we do not provide you is an assessment of which areas you're strong in and which areas you're weak in. There's a couple of reasons for that. There's a lot of interplay uh, uh, there's a lot of interplay between the different technologies, and so what we're looking for is our candidates who know all of the technologies fairly well, versus someone who's really strong in like just one area and not in the other. So, um, given that, in order to kind of push that as the recipe for success, we push everyone to be strong in all things versus just some things. So the next question is, will we still have access to review the videos and the material after completing all of the courses? The answer to that is yes. After you complete, if you do a full run through of all the materials, all the Coursera and all the quick labs, and you say, okay, I felt really comfortable with the foundations, but maybe I'm not as comfortable with one of the other sections. That could be, anything. Pick something out of the air, maybe containers and services. You can go back and you can review some or all of the material that you've covered. So you could just go back, and if you wanted to reread or recover just the container and services Coursera coursework, you could do that. Same for the hands-on. If you have finished all of the quests, and you feel like you can either do with a little bit of review on all of the things or a little bit of review on just some of the things, hey, the world is your oyster. You have all the choice in the world. You can go back and either review all of the things or some of the things at your leisure, um, for for a specific amount of time after after you have gone through all of the material and after the end of our 7-week session here, you'll have some time to review all those materials. You won't have forever, but we do allow you to go back and review the materials. So let's see here. I don't see any other questions. I'm going to assume that's because I have covered everything so well that nobody has any questions on anything. And usually that's the cue for like 10 other questions to pop in to the Q&A window. So I either have indeed covered everything sufficiently, or there aren't any other questions. So let's see here. At this point, generally what I do is I go back through and cover some of the material that we've already talked about, right? The fact that so let's just go back and go through it. We're in week 6. You should have covered a lot of the Coursera courses, including GCP Fundamentals Core Infrastructure, Cloud Infrastructure Foundations, Cloud Infrastructure Core Services, Cloud Infrastructure Scaling and Automation, in addition to the on-demand courses of Elastic Cloud Infrastructure for Containers and Services, and then a separate session on preparing for the Associate Cloud Engineer exam. Now, each of these courses will have a kind of a guideline as to how long it should take you to get through the material. If it's your first time going through the material, then you may find that, for example, you do take 10 hours to get through the GCP Fundamentals Core Infrastructure work or materials. If it's your second or third time through, you may find that it takes you less than 10 hours. You may find that it takes you more than 10 hours. Your mileage may vary is the phrase I like to use, depending on how comfortable you are with the materials. I find, at least for myself, that the more comfortable I am with the material, the faster I am to go through it the second or the third or the fourth time. That said, if you've gone through the material more already once, you do have the ability to go back and review the material a second, third, fourth time. So certainly use that to your advantage. And if you feel like there are some materials that you are more comfortable with others, then you should go back and review the things that you don't feel that you're strong on. And perhaps you use the practice exam as an indicator of that. Practice exam is available through the website, through the cloud.google.com/certification website. Each of the different exams have their own specific practice exam. So, and the way we kind of organize that is by attaching each of the practice exams to the specific exam. So when you go into when you go to get to the certification homepage, you scroll down, there's links to the details of each of the different certificates, either professional or associate level or G Suite. And then within those, then you have the exam specific guides for studying, as well as the exam practice exams. And have a great day.